Bad Bosses supports our law enforcement community and our first responders, as well as our veterans and current military that are serving and protecting the United States. We just want to put that out there, and hopefully they're all served by good bosses and not by bad bosses. And then as we roll into this next one, I want to talk a little bit about this leader. We had the opportunity to work together. Was a great leader from my perspective. Also partly an inspiration for bad bosses, because he was such an amazing good boss and a good leader that many of us who had the great opportunity to work with him have learned so much from him. And this is exactly what a good boss looks like, what a great leader looks like. And I think anyone who's had the experience to know Tony Callisto will tell you that. So in the instance of transparency, again, I had the opportunity to work for this leader. Good boss, very supportive, actually all the attributes that you would look for in a leader and in a boss. No further ado, Tony Callisto, you've got the floor.
Great. Thanks, Joe. It was actually a real pleasure working with you over the years. Just a little bit of background. You and I worked together at the university for the full 15 years I was there. And then the last 6 years, I had one of your units as part of my responsibility. I worked with the sheriff's office for 25 years before I went to the university, but at Syracuse University for 15 years, I was in pretty much senior leadership kind of roles. I went there in middle management, where I was able to work with the Department of Public Safety, and in that role, led a team of folks to transition the Public Safety Department from a security department into a law enforcement agency, and ultimately we were able to get internationally accredited as a campus law enforcement agency. And then before I retired, we had the gold standard, the accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, non-campus. And so it was a great experience working with that team and with that group. And I did have the opportunity to build a division at the university that you became a part of after about 9 years as public safety chief. The Chancellor Syverud offered me an opportunity to be senior vice president overseeing everything related to risk and safety. And so we created a division of campus safety and emergency services, where we pulled together everything related to risk management, fire and life safety, emergency management, parking and transportation, public safety, law enforcement division, public safety security operations, and technology, security technologies for the campus. And I had to work very closely with senior leadership at the campus in that role, but more importantly, with folks like you that had middle manager roles, director roles throughout the campus. And so I had a great opportunity there. Also been doing a lot of consulting work over the years. I did a lot of organizational development and labor relations work as a consultant, aside from the law enforcement, security, and criminal justice work that I did. And so carry a lot of that background working with organizations and focusing on conflict resolution and helping leaders become good conflict resolvers.
So I'm going to jump in right here because you and I had the background and we worked together so closely. But I'm very interested in speaking to union leadership and having them as a guest on the podcast. But union leadership, bad bosses, do they go hand in hand? One of the things that I experienced is that bad bosses can frequently lead to unionization. It's not my understanding originally. I was a labor relations major in the beginning of my college career. I had a great program at Onondaga Community College, which was facilitated out of Cornell University, and you learn, everything that so many people take for granted today was actually brought to us by unions. And the role of the union in the workplace has certainly changed, and I'm certainly not advocating one way or the other. I'm simply trying to talk a little bit about, does a bad boss lead to unionization?
Yeah, so what I've seen in my consulting career, as well as my observations in organizations that I've worked in, is that that bosses' behavior can spark concerns of rank and file employees that would lead them to unite, to become, to try to form a union and find some union protection. The common challenges, the common themes are the boss doesn't have my back. I can't trust that if something bad happens in the organization that the leadership of the organization is going to support me in the role that I play, even if I follow the rules. And so where you have critical, leadership that criticizes more often than they praise, that doesn't offer leadership through good interactive training and good interactive response to concerns that people raise, the likelihood that that there's going to be a move to unionize in a place where maybe there wasn't a union or didn't need to be a union is possible. It's likely to happen, and so I think it's really important to be a good boss around being responsive to concerns that are raised by folks, to be an advocate for the folks that work for you where you can, and to be fair. Fairness is a critical part of good leadership, and where people see levels of unfairness, unequal treatment, inequality in performance expectations, favoritism. Those bad boss behaviors tend to drive people to collectively want to, find someone to protect their interests.
So you touched on something that I always found to be challenging in my career as a supervisor and as a manager and then later on as a director, which is the balance between fairness and treating people equally. And the challenge that I found that, maybe you could speak to a little bit was people have different responsibilities. People have different roles. So how do you manage that from your perspective? And then how do you convey that to the people who work for you so that they can, bring it back to the people that work for them?
Boy, Joe, that's the hard part of the art of leadership in organizations. I think when you think about the word fair, what that means to different people are different things. And, the old friend of mine that's currently a great leader out in the sheriff's office out in Santa Barbara, California, Vince Wazalewski. Vince would always say, well, fair is not necessarily even. And he's right. In that, fair is really about justice. It's about reaction and response to ensuring that good performance is rewarded and poor performance is managed and led towards good performance. And so, fairness is both. That if I've got a group of 10 employees and 2 of them aren't pulling their weight, it's fair for me to be working with those 2 to deal with the challenges, to raise the concern about what the challenges are in their performance, and then to provide them with a path towards improving that performance. And then if they don't, provide them a path out of the organization if I have to, right?
Sure.
And that's fair. That's fair to the rest of the 8 that are doing what's expected of them.
Right.
And so, fairness isn't always even. Now, treating people equally means I treat people with respect and with dignity, regardless of their role and regardless of their responsibilities and regardless of their station in life. But I provide them with clarity of expectations. To treat you equally to someone who's 6 ranks below you or someone who has a completely different job expectation doesn't mean I expect the same things out of each of you. But what I expect is that what your role is clear to you. And as a boss, I can see you performing your role consistent with the expectations that I've articulated and set for you. So my job in all this is make sure there's clarity. Your job is to offer me feedback when it isn't clear, and then to get the job done consistent with the mission and the vision that we've articulated.
Now, do you think that is a struggle for a lot of managers, supervisors, bosses, that they don't know how to balance the equity against the fairness and vice versa?
I think, you and I have talked about this a lot in the past too, that relationships are important. And that, yes, for many leaders and many managers and many supervisors, balancing this sense to try to treat everyone equally with this responsibility to provide for a just and fair workplace, that there can be a challenge because people don't perform equally. People don't behave equally. Yeah. So from the fairness perspective, recognizing that, I always have to circle back to what are the instructions that are given? What's the vision and the mission of the organization? And how am I articulating that? What training am I providing the folks to be able to meet that mission? And what instructions am I giving them if they need instructions? Some people just need delegation. They need to say, here's the vision, here's the mission, go do it. Other folks need leaders that are going to handhold them for a portion of it until they can get some, their sea legs and really begin to learn. There's an author, Blanchard, that wrote a book, Situational Leadership, that that kind of articulates matching leadership styles to worker employee development levels, and so those high achievers, those folks that are highly motivated and highly committed and highly skilled, well, I can be the delegator. Folks that are relatively new and don't have a lot of skills, and might be very highly committed but low skill level and high motivation, well, they need a coach. They need someone who's going to provide them, with the background and support them along the way. The folks who are, maybe a lot of experience, long time in a career, maybe in the same role for a long time, so they're getting stale. They probably need a supportive leader, someone who's, doesn't have to coach them, doesn't have to delegate, but can, encourage them in ways around productivity and goal setting, in trying to help with intrinsic motivation. And then there's sometimes that you just have to be the director role. You have to direct people because maybe they got low skill and low commitment, and they just need to be told what to do along the way. So, as a good leader, I got to be able to balance all those. So equal doesn't mean that everybody gets the director.
Right.
Sometimes I have to be the director for the least productive, and I have to be the delegator for the most productive.
So your characteristics, or you're modifying them based on who you're managing and who you're supervising.
Well, I'm modifying my own behavior, my own leadership model, based on what that commitment and motivation level is and the skill level of that particular employee. And that's Ken Blanchard. Situational leadership is just from my time as a learning leader, was one of the most effective models that I actually learned about, and I continued 35 years later to do that. My first supervisory job, I'm almost 64 years old. My first supervisory job, I was 25. Matter of fact, it goes back from that. My first real supervisory job, I was 16 years old, Joe, and I got hired to set up and tear down tables for bingo at a bingo hall. And I had a crew of people that worked with me. I hired my friends, and I'll tell you what, I learned how to be a bad boss and a good boss in the brief periods of time we had to tear down and set up, and I was responsible to make sure it got done. And what was most important in that little job was that I didn't work any slower or any less hard than any of the folks that worked with me. I had to be the hardest working person on that job to get the other three people that were doing it with me to keep the pace and get the job done so we could go home, and then get back the next morning and tear down.
You've actually opened up quite a few things that I want to go back to, because I feel that there are things worth us talking about, and hopefully other guests will talk about as we talk about leadership, bad bosses versus good bosses. But you articulated something that I think is very important, which is mission and vision. One of the things I think when you go around, I've been going around as I've been putting this podcast together, talking to people in different types of work, from our fast food friends to, I don't want to actually name them, but some of the smaller department stores. And there seems to be a lack today of mission and vision. And how important is that in leadership and management and supervisor? If the overall organization lacks a mission and vision, then how are people going to come in and understand what's the mission and vision? I don't, regardless of what fast food company you're with or what, retail store you might be, if they lack mission and vision, how are they going to be able to be successful?
Well, they're not. I mean, let's face it. If folks don't know what our organizational goals are and our objectives are, what we want to accomplish as an organization, people will just do what they want to do as opposed to what they need to do, right? So mission is very important, and it gives me something. I have a mission in my life. Right? I have a mission with regards to my family. I have a mission with regards to my faith. I have a mission with regards to my career. I establish clarity of goals. If we don't have goals and we don't have objectives, we're probably not going to do a good job. Vision is the foresight, is something that leadership needs to be able to show people. Here's what we're heading for. We're going to be the best at this. I'm going to be the best hamburger place in the country. That's our vision. And our mission is to serve our customers with high quality foods that they're going to enjoy. There's a mission, high quality food, customers going to enjoy it. A vision, be the best burger joint in the country. And so that, from all that, everything else flows. And so larger organizations that have, clarity of mission, within units and subunits within these large organizations, everything that folks do and every part of what my unit mission might be needs to reflect what the organizational mission is. And if I do a good job of heading towards the organizational mission and people have clarity in their small role that we have in our particular unit, that actually can be a motivator and something as a leader I can always point to and remind people, is that consistent with our mission? Is that consistent with our vision? And if the answer is yes, let's do it. If it isn't, then let's do something different.
Have you found in your career and your experience, and I think I could speak to it a little bit as well myself, that a leader or manager or supervisor who doesn't articulate a vision or understanding the mission of the organization is automatically a bad boss?
Well,
or do you find that somebody is struggling to become a good boss, but they weren't themselves provided that?
Yeah. So let's just say this, Joe. I don't think there's any such thing as a bad boss, and I don't think there's anything such as a great boss. Some people who are considered very good bosses do some stupid things sometimes.
I agree.
And you honored me at the beginning of this podcast today with regards to, you thought I was a great boss. Well, I did some stupid things along the way. There were things that I wish I could take back or wish I could do differently.
Sure.
But along the way, some folks that you might look back and think, that person's a jerk and they're an awful boss. Chances are pretty good. They do some stupid things sometimes, but there's probably some pretty good things they do too. So, I think this is an error. This as a leader and a manager, not identifying with clarity what the mission is. And again, if I'm not the top leader in the organization, I ought to be asking that person, okay, what is our mission here? What is our vision here? The best leaders have clarity in what they articulate as a vision and mission, and they're able to reflect back to it in pretty much every aspect of the role and responsibility of folks throughout the organization.
So do you think that that's something that's kind of, as I think about it, is it something that's learned? Is it taught? You see today, and no matter where you go or who you're dealing with, people are unhappy, and you could see it in the service levels that you receive. I'm picking on the fast food industry today, just because lately it just seems like, regardless of what chain you're going to, it's just not the same. And then when you look at, I was in a store the other day where I literally heard the manager yelling with customers in the store at staff about how frustrated they were, and I felt horrible for the staff. I wanted to say something because you're in a retail environment. You shouldn't be yelling at staff. Yeah. But how do you get people? And I agree with you, because I know I was a bad boss. There's things I did in my career that I'm certainly not proud of. How do you get people to take a step back if your organization, some of these stores probably don't have what we were fortunate to have with SU, the environment, to cultivate that, or to be cultivated, or to have that support. So how do you conquer that? How do you make a bad boss a good boss?
Yeah. So that's a
a tolerable boss. I mean, you said there's, I think it's something that changes. How do you struggle with that? Is it?
Yeah, leadership development is really important, and you think back to our time together. I had a very strong portfolio of good leaders. There were 6 people that reported directly to me that headed up very important roles in the organization. At the university, but likewise at the sheriff's office. I had a cadre of 11 different shifts and units and sections that reported to me as a chief. And it was really important on a pretty daily basis for me, as trying to be a good boss and a good leader, to engage my folks every day. You might recall, whether we met daily, we certainly talked on the phone daily.
Absolutely.
Whether it was just to check in, hey, what's going on? And I was always that open door for people to be able to bounce things off of when you were struggling with some issue, some decision, some challenging employee. I'm going to be my best boss if I'm a resource to you when challenging things are on your plate, and to help you get past those. And more often than not, my most important job was to just be that sounding board and to ask the right questions for you to come to the conclusion that you needed to be able to come to your solution. And if you couldn't, then I'd offer ideas and solutions. My Tony Callisto best boss was always the one that did lots of facilitation, lots of reflective listening, lots of interaction with the senior leaders under me in a way that they came to their own conclusions. And then very often you might remember I'd say, well, okay, what do you think? You want to hear what I think, Joe? Because then I'd go on, if I saw you still struggling, I'd offer you some options and some ideas. That's the kind of leadership development that's really necessary. And so if you want to be a good boss, you got to really learn to be a good listener, a great follower. Best bosses are very good followers too. And someone who can articulate with some clarity what the mission and vision is that we're trying to accomplish.
Do you think as a society we're spending enough time on this topic? I mean, one of the things that I felt so passionate about in starting this podcast on Bad Bosses is because I felt it's something that no one is talking about. No matter what organization you belong to, like you articulated a lot of great things, but how did you come to that?
Yeah.
People don't come to that on their own. That's years of experience. It's years of education.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's a commitment to want to be better. And not just sit in a circle and not really do some kind of self-improvement. So when you look at other organizations, there doesn't seem to be that level of commitment to their people or their people committed to them to try to be a good boss. Not saying they're going to be a great boss, but at least try to be a good boss. So you don't see some of the things that I articulated earlier about someone actually yelling at an employee in front of a store full of people.
Yeah. In that example is just the best example of always praise in public and always, punish privately. That's not rocket science. That's just, that's good human behavior as a leader, right? And honestly, for many people that starts in the home. I was blessed with a father who had a military background, who could be very strict, but it was also, family mission focused, and what was in the interest of the family, what was good for the family, was the direction that we were going to go, and a mother who was nurturing and loving. So I was blessed with that. So I was lucky to kind of walk into my careers having a kind of family leadership that was cultivated love and respect. And I often say this, Joe, you got to love your people. You know, that you know, the people
Absolutely.
that work for you, you know, and sometimes it's tough love, but sometimes it's you know, a love of that human person. If you love the people that work for you and you want what's best for them, that's a foundation for being a good boss, right? And we don't do enough of that. We don't do enough of cultivating that. You know, you want to be a good boss, seek out good leaders as examples. Read about good leadership. Read, go to classes. You know, I was blessed with opportunities where sheriff's office sent me to training. University allowed me to go outside the organization for training at different organizations. But along the way, I invested in myself too. I paid my way through college and piecemeal from a associate's degree to a bachelor's degree to a master's degree over the course of a better part of a decade. I made that investment. My employer didn't make that investment. I didn't get free tuition. You know, before I got my master's degree, I wasn't at the university and had any benefits.
Right.
But I saw the opportunity to build my own skill sets by picking the right kinds of college classes that I thought would make me a better boss. And, you know, I can't say enough about the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. When I was a lieutenant at the sheriff's office, I had a bachelor's degree. I earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Columbia College of Missouri that I got up at the Hancock Field. And I learned a lot about criminal justice leadership there, but it was the Maxwell School, public administration from Syracuse University, where I really learned conflict resolution skills. And those are probably the most important skills I ever learned. Dr. Neil Katz was my professor in many of those classes, just outstanding.
Do you think that should just be a part of management training in general? That, one of the things that we notice is that there is no management training in many organizations, that you get promoted based on performance, but then they don't take it to the next level. And one of the things also that I want you to talk a little bit more about too is mentoring. Yeah. So you impressed upon all of us mentoring programs. You assigned a mentor to me. It was great. I did that to some of the people that worked for me. It worked for them. A lot of organizations don't do that. So they don't invest in their folks, and then they wonder why they're not successful, or really why they end up being bad bosses, because they didn't take the time to make them a good boss.
Yeah. So mentoring is important, Joe. That as a learn by mistake sometime leader, from 1987, my first real role as a supervisor when I was promoted to sergeant in the sheriff's office. I had a group of 35 people. I was 25 years old. There was only 2 or 3 people that were my age. Everybody else was a decade or more older. So I had to build credibility through respect. I had to respect the folks and the experiences that they had, and learn how to lead folks by offering ideas and suggestions, but then more importantly, recognizing great performance along the way, and in talking about it. Talking about when someone did really well and appreciating it, and then building respect, so then I could mentor those folks, even that they were older than me, about new ways and new models and things that I was learning along the way. And so mentorship is something you could start early as a leader, as a supervisor, and then as a senior leader, looking for others to mentor. Folks that work with you or for you can be very powerful. Looking at the different skill sets of folks within your own organization, and encouraging them to be mentors. Having people become mentors gives them a new leadership opportunity, and so I mentor the mentor, and then the mentor mentors you, it can be a very, very powerful tool in really creating a learning organization.
So one of the things that you mentioned there is opportunity. So, we hope to get some small businesses on. We want to do a small business segment on bad bosses. So many small businesses. I happen to be sitting next to a gentleman at getting my oil changed at the dealership one day. Small business owner, very frustrated with his team, very frustrated getting people to work. And his answer, and I think you and I have had this conversation, his answer was just pay people more. I'm paying people $10 more an hour because I need them to perform. Does that solve the problem? Does money solve the problem? And is that small businesses are probably challenged today more than established businesses in the sense that, they're trying to build a team and may not have the skills and the opportunities that both you and I had to develop those.
So, there's been lots of research on the topic of, how much you pay people and how much is money a motivating factor. In the sales industry, where commissions are the main income for folks, money's a huge motivator. Let's set that aside. Every other kind of business where you're not getting a commission, money gets you to go to work. So money needs to be adequate to get people to be there and stay there. It needs to be adequate to be competitive with others who might look for your talent. And it can be, a motivator in times where, you can offer a bonus or offer something for a job really well done. But that isn't what motivates people in general in the workplace. In my experience, what motivates people is a clear understanding of what their role in the organization is and how their role contributes to the mission
and vision,
and having a boss that cares about them. That it looks like that this boss is willing to listen to me, willing to hear me out, willing to implement ideas that I have, willing to let me run with something, willing to give me opportunities to grow. That's what people really are motivated by. Certainly, that's what motivated me all the years. Yes, I had to have enough money to support my family, had to have enough money to, to survive. And it was always nice to get a little bit more money. But as soon as I got a little bit more money, what are you giving me? When are you going to give me some more and more money? That's when's the next raise coming? So money's going to get us to work. It's really about how we treat people and deal with people that motivates them to become intrinsically motivated, internally motivated within themselves to do a good job because it feels good to do a good job.
So what would your advice be today? I don't want to go over too much of time, but if you were to, and obviously you've counseled your children and they've all done well, but if you were to offer a piece of advice, if a young person came to you today and said, geez, I just got offered this promotion and I'm going to be a manager. I've never managed anybody before in my life. I was the only child, so I haven't had a lot of interaction growing up. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, so if somebody's going to be promoted in the new position and they told me about it, I'd be saying you really need to look. There are all kinds of college courses, even at the community college level, around leadership, around management and supervision. But most importantly, if you can find education around listening, around communication skills, and around conflict resolution skills. Those two are cornerstones of being the good boss. If you can't listen and assert, so I got to be able to listen with concern and listen with sincerity, be able to reflect back to people what they just said to me, and then be able to assert, be able to provide opinions and options and direction, I'm not going to be a good boss. And if I can't walk into a room and see challenging situations between employees going on and work towards creating calm in the chaos, resolving conflict, being the mediator as a manager for those folks, I'm probably not going to be the best boss I can be. So conflict resolution, good communication skills, look for those training opportunities, those college classes, invest in yourself to improve those skills, and you will be a good boss, not a bad boss.
That's awesome. Promise me you'll come back and do another segment on leadership and management.
Sure.
I think you bring a lot, and listening. I think that's something I learned from you to hone in on. Listening is key, and a lot of managers do not listen. So thank you again for coming in and doing the podcast. I really appreciate it. I think we're on a hot topic, and I think a lot of people, I've gone and talked to a lot of people in different industries, and everybody said to me, oh, I'd love to come on. I'd love to tell you my story. I'd love to tell you about this boss. I'd love to tell you the way we're treated. So I think it's something that is well overdue and being addressed. And I appreciate your sincerity and your frankness and the opportunity to have you on, and look forward to having you on in the future.
I look forward to joining you again, Joe.
All right. Thanks, Tony.